Welcome. My name is George Valdez, your host and also head of marketing here at Monograph. It's my pleasure to introduce Dave Fano, founder and CEO of Teal. Dave and I worked together at during our time at WeWork, where he served as chief growth officer. Post WeWork, Dave started Teal, a digital career companion platform designed to help you find and land a job you love. I'm delighted to share with you a conversation that Dave and I had last week. In this session, we're going to hear from Dave about what it means to design a fulfilling and purposeful career and how we can start to think about making moves when the time is right. Dave, excited to have you join us here today.
Hey, George, thanks for having me. Excited to be at the event. Seems like an awesome thing you guys have going.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So I like to kind of start a little bit just by tracking at a high level your career, which I think has been super fascinating, right? So you go from doing architecture, studying architecture for master's, you go working into architecture, end up teaching, then end up starting your own kind of company, consulting, and having a very illustrious career at that point, and getting acquired, all the way to leading nearly almost every, it seemed like every department at WeWork that had to do anything with growing the business. And now you're part of a new company that you founded called Teal. With that kind of, the meteoric rise in a sense of going from so many different types of, let's say, working models, being an employee, being an executive, like what have you learned along the way that's really informed why you're starting Teal? And maybe for those that might not be super aware of Teal, maybe we can also give even a little background behind that.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for making that sound way greater in retrospect than it felt at the time. Yeah, look, I think there was a lot of sort of mistakes and learnings and discomfort along the way. And so I would say that like the through line on all those things is I was never comfortable like just settling with not enjoying my work. In between graduating school and starting Case, I worked at Shop Architects, which was really great. But as an example, I loved 3D rendering. And I loved doing it in school. But then when I was doing it for other people's projects and they were like telling me to change the colors of the carpet, I no longer loved it. And I've never felt that I needed to complete something for the sake of completing it. For better or for worse, it makes it pretty easy for me to not finish stuff. But I also have like a very low tolerance for prolonged discomfort. And that has been like the kind of recurring theme throughout. So it wasn't as intentional. It's just like I was determined to like what I was doing. And if I wasn't, then I'd stop. So when I worked at Shop, I loved teaching. I was working at Shop at the same time. But then once it's like, I'm not enjoying myself anymore. For no fault of theirs, just the work I was doing different things. That's what could I do? I really want to do this stuff. There was really no venue to do it, so we started Case. And also I had great co-founders in Fed and Steve, and we got to do that for a while. We actually left to start another company, which is a tech startup. At the same time, could do the BIM consulting and the technology stuff that we were doing. And the other part of my career, I think that in retrospect is more clear, is it's been additive, right? So I was teaching and I learned about technology while I was in school. Then, I started to, within Shop, when I worked there, I started to teach people Revit because I got excited about it. And then that became the foundation for how we started Case, which is we would teach other firms how to use it. And then that led to us like doing things. And so it was always kind of building on what we had. And so I've always been able to leverage like my career past as assets, whether I wanted to do it or not, like as the next thing I wanted to do. And so on and so forth. Case we're having a great time. We were 7 years in of building a service business. We were lucky to land WeWork as a client. They were a client for 3 years. They were growing really, really quickly. They, from multiple times, they asked us to join the firm and join the company and to acquire us. We didn't really know what that meant. We never thought Case would be acquired. I think on a number of occasions, we told our whole team that we never would be acquired. But then at a certain point, the opportunity became interesting around what we could do and the impact we could have on the industry. And being on the owner side versus on a consultant side. And WeWork was very big and had a lot of buying power in the market. And so that became more interesting than what we were doing. So we pursued that. And then at a certain point, I got to experience a lot of really incredible things. I was responsible for a subset of things. There was a lot of incredible people there that did a lot of really, really hard things that I did not have to pay attention to at all. Like running the buildings and HR and the business and finance. And so a lot of complicated things there. I got to be a part of it, a small part of it, which was amazing. But at a certain point, I didn't feel like I was growing, and it was where I wanted to take my career. I wanted to get back to being entrepreneurial, work-life combination. We're having our second child. And for our first child, it was very much in the thick of case, and I didn't get to spend as much time with her as I would have liked. And I said, you know what, probably not going to do this again. I want to be there for the second one. And so I resigned, left a lot of money on the table. There was a lot of, potential things to do there, but just wasn't what I wanted to do in life. And I figured I could start my own thing, have a little more control of my life. And that led to what I'm doing now with Teal, which I can get into a little more, but, tech startup with its own challenges and fun.
And through that time, I mean, you got to see, having employees at different levels, having people report to you at different levels. I'm curious, like how did that inform even the way you think about careers today? I mean, obviously, like there's one you highlighted how if you're not kind of enjoying it anymore, then you have pretty low tolerance for that. Do you see that with Teal now as something that's kind of like really helped to sort of as part of your why to start this type of company?
Yeah, I mean, I really connected with WeWork's mission. This idea of creating a world where people make a life, not just a living, or empowering people to do what they love. My main contention with it was, even though they didn't position it this way, but given who our customer was, is it was kind of targeted at the business owner. They did a good job of making it a brand that spoke to everybody, but it was kind of this like entrepreneurial angle. And I don't have any issue. Obviously, it'd be a hypocrite to say that I don't think entrepreneurialism is awesome, but it's not for everyone. And I think a lot of people pursue starting a company, I think architects in particular, or any like service industry. It's kind of this pursuit of autonomy and being able to do your own work, but they don't realize that it's actually, I'd say it's like less autonomy, because now you've got clients and you've got to get business and you got to become a marketer and you got to do sales and you got to do finance, and thinking, I'm just going to get to do architecture all the time, I'm going to be the main designer. That's actually not true. Same for graphic designers, you kind of name it, marketers. And I wanted to sort of help build a world where more people could have that sense of autonomy and control in their career and do their craft and do the work that they love, that charges them up and energizes them, but don't have to start a company and do all this other stuff that's actually not that exciting. So how could we empower them with that sense of confidence and infrastructure as if they were the business owner, but where they could actually just do their craft? And then if any point a company isn't the place where they can continue to grow and do that, they feel empowered and confident to move on and do the next thing.
And you've had, I just because I know that you've had a lot of conversations and have helped a lot of people that work in architecture transition to different either roles within architecture or roles outside of architecture. Is there anything from those conversations that you've picked up on that you think would be helpful for firm owners to know about? I mean, I think, like, what kind of changes are you seeing from the people, or like what are the top concerns that people have when they come to you and they're like, hey, I want to make a career transition? Because that's not an easy decision to make either, to say like, I want to just completely go 180 and just do something else. It's a very thoughtful decision for a lot of people. What kind of advice would you give to firm owners, just from what you've picked up on those conversations you've had over the past couple of years?
People want to feel like their decisions and contributions matter. And I think the pyramid in most architecture firms fans out kind of quickly. You've got your 3 or 4 at the top, maybe 1 or 2 at the top, and then your ability to sort of impact the work as it sort of goes down becomes less and less. And I think we're in a world now where you can directly do things that are quite impactful. You could start a YouTube channel and, within a year be talking to millions of people. You could start a TikTok channel within weeks talking to millions of people. And I think more broadly, like the younger generation is excited about building and not buildings. And they like making, right? Creator. I mean, every architect's a creator, and now it's like that's the thing. And so I think there are new, faster ways to kind of satiate these desires to create that aren't at the pace that the building industry moves. And I think there's less of an appreciation for it needing to be as long as it is. And I also think that there's a transition from what we value, right? I think with the imagification of the world, with like the Instagrams and things like that, like interior design, I think, architects used to sort of like brush it off as like not as a equal profession. I think if anything now more than ever, interior design and beautiful spaces and the insides of buildings have equal or more value. And so what I would say to firms is talent today has more options than ever. And I think what I haven't been in the industry for a while, but what I would say is like leadership in the firms that I would talk to there was a bit of a lack of empathy, of understanding of the modern workforce, right? Because when they were coming up, they understood that they were going to be there and they were going to get their shot in 20, 30 years, and they just had to do their time. I think the idea of like doing your time is gone, and don't expect because you did it that your workforce is going to do it. And so they need to adapt. And I think the firms that don't adapt to understand the modern workforce and what the modern workforce is looking for from a fulfilling career, they're not going to be able to keep them. And those same architects will just as quickly become UX designers. They'll become product designers. And they'll get to create. It just won't be buildings, but I don't think they'll care as much.
Yeah, you underscored a lot of different changes that are fascinating. One of them is obviously like the audience building today is much easier than ever. And then on the flip side, it's the education component. I think that for us, let's say the majority of the generations that work within architecture today grew up in an environment in which access to information and knowledge to change careers or to like learn something new was actually very limited. And so paying your dues is kind of an outcropping, or is impacted by that. Versus today, you can go on YouTube and learn almost anything, and it's that kind of free access to information today that really is another part of how the trends have changed, right, and how organizations have changed. And I'm curious, like if that is the case, then what are, and obviously you haven't necessarily been in the industry for a minute, but I mean, it's not like it has radically changed probably since the days you were working in it. Are there, things even, I always reflect back on the time at WeWork, even the way to, whether it was verticalized, whether it's a verticalized business or not, just even the way that design teams were organized, even the way that project teams were organized, all that was somewhat rethought to meet the product and the needs of the product. But some of those really ended, even that organization ended up attracting a lot of people to go work there, very talented people, because they saw maybe not just the high growth potential of working at WeWork, but also something different about the culture in how people were working. The fact that you could have a manager, for instance, that you report to, very different in architecture practice today, right? When you ask someone, a designer, who do you report to? They kind of give you a blank stare, like, well, it's sort of the PM, but not really. You don't have this concept of even one-on-ones, right? Which we talk a lot about at Monograph here, about how small things like that can have a meaningful impact. How, in the conversations that you were having at that time, leading those teams, how did that evolve, or like how like basically what are the takeaways from how you design, how those teams were designed that a firm could apply today to even make a nudge towards empowerment, towards autonomy, or helping people sort of, feel like they're contributing?
Well, there's a few things at play here. There's I feel like some companies are either fundamentally product led or project led, and most service firms are project led. And so when you think about project led firms, it's everything is reporting through the project. The goal is to get a project done, and then you recombine. You build the right team for the project instead of building the right team for the product. And the way I make a difference between a project and a product is a project has an end date and a product does not. And so there is this understanding that the project will end. And so there is a reluctance, let's call it, to invest in the long term because the project's going to end. And so by definition, what that results in is that architecture firms in particular, I've heard it come up a lot of times, like struggle to invest in training, struggle to invest in people. Cause like, they're always like, well, if we don't land another project after this project, we're going to have to shed a bunch of folks. And so there's this like ebb and flow. The problem is that it hasn't made the full leap like the movie industry, where of course it's project based, but then people get paid and it's understood in the way like the contractual relationships. So firms bring on people as salaried employees and then they lose them, they leave them. The loyalty is weird. So the same people can stay and get to do multiple projects, which then sort of like creates that clustering at the top. And I'd say all the kind of systemic issues that you see in almost any project-based business. And then what ends up happening is like the people that excel and grow are the people that can bring in more projects. And it becomes less about the craft and more about like growing the business. And that's the cycle. On a product-based, you can now start to invest in like functional expertise, and you can then start to structure the activities on a product basis, right? Like a version of a firm could be is like, we've got a bathroom team. That's all they do. They're the bathroom experts. So no matter what project we get, we pull in the bathroom team and they do all the bathrooms, and and they've modularized it in a perfect way. I'll talk about some other like why opinions. I don't have data to back this up of why I don't think that's the case, but right, that would be a more product-based approach, and the domain expertise is on the product versus the project. I think we also have a fundamental flaw in the building industry in that it's a labor-based industry, and ultimately we get paid by labor. Like, sure, we may price a project on a fixed fee basis, but that number came from a bottoms-up analysis of how much time I think it's going to take. Mm-hmm. It's not based on how much profit you're going to make the owner, some long-term revenue share. It's not IP based, right? It's labor based. And so what that then results in is, whether people realize it or not, is a lack of pursuit of efficiency, right? Efficiency is actually not good for your business model, because that is then less hours I can bill for, which is the fundamental way in which I charge, right? And if anything, we've seen that go the other way. Drawing sets have gotten bigger. We add more requirements. We do more stuff. We do more so that we can bill more hours. I don't think anyone's doing it like that directly, but when you look at, you sort of like follow the money and how an industry works, at the end of the day, everyone who's in the building industry benefits from inefficiency. Change orders, taking longer, all those things result in somebody making more money. Products, it's the other way around, right? You have competition in the market, products get cheaper, you've got internationalization or globalization. And so there is pressure to deliver products more efficiently, better, and continue to improve the product and develop those specialties and that expertise. And then you will go hire that person who is an expert at that, right? So I think that is a big fundamental difference in product versus project based. And how architecture firms could do it, absolutely could do, but there's a lot of stuff to unwind. Education, right? Every semester in school, you don't take half of what you did the previous semester and like build on it. You start from scratch. Everything is about this pursuit of starting from scratch, the blank canvas. And that's what's seen as like the excitement and the opportunity. It's almost it's like a negative thing to be efficient and reuse. As a designer, you redesign every time. You're selling out if you reuse. And so I think there is just a deep, like ingrained thought process in the industry that prevents it from being more product based. which is, to answer your question, that was the fundamental shift we made at WeWork. We were product based. There was obviously an aspect of projects because of geography, but the team stayed the same.
Yeah, and you're able to make those calls on investing in sort of like in different types of initiatives that would drive down costs over time because of the scale of the business as well, and kind of orient teams like that. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we have been seeing with certain firms is like, they're all struggling to figure out how to, or many of them are trying to figure out what's the new kind of business model that would allow them to get some more asymmetric upside. Like, our best practice webinar series, we actually for about the past couple of weeks, the realtors get brought up almost in every conversation about, they're able to get 3%, the monopoly that exists on that side, and how can architects get that? And there's, we've interviewed firms like Gluck Plus, which have a different model that are more like developer oriented. Like they actually do design build all the way to and have equity in their projects. So it seems like there are some examples where it is possible, but it's just, I think to your point too, it's like at the education level, it kind of starts there too. I mean,
yeah, it's a combination of education and interest. Right. Look, this has been happening forever. John Portman did it. He transitioned to one of the best architects ever, and he started doing development. I don't think there's anything preventing that. I've never understood like why architecture firms don't have a brokerage. It's like, okay, I just finished the building. Now I'm gonna help you sell it, and I'm gonna help you fill it.
Yeah.
I made the renderings. I know it better than anybody else. Like, why couldn't they go sell it? Why couldn't they have a secondary wing that actually, if you do large residential development, like, why don't you help sell the building? Right. Like, I may be speaking out of line here. Like maybe there's something about being a registered architect that prevents someone from doing that. But I feel like there's enough.
It actually doesn't. Yeah, there's nothing that really actually prevents it. And there are some firms that have kind of done that in some sense, where they've had, where they've gotten their real estate license to some degree and been able to kind of do both. And ultimately, when I've heard feedback from them, it's that they end up making more from the brokerage side than they do from the services side. But even then, you have examples of models like that where it's like, one that we like to highlight here is this interior design company called Studio McGee, which is on Netflix. They're like hugely popular, right? And they went from a team of two, husband and wife, to a team of I think 30 something with 90 million in annual revenue last year, in 6 or 7 years. And it's because they do furniture, right? Their whole thing is like they sell their design services as photography sets for their furniture that not only did they spec in those projects, but then use for marketing collateral. And it's just like, all this to say is that there's still a lot of opportunity to rethink the way that the work is being done. It's just, I think being intentional about it to your interest too, which kind of goes full circle back to like what you were saying earlier about, architects go into it thinking that they just want to design, and that they're going to get freedom to just be designers, but that's not really the case. They have to put in the work to understand the full business. And maybe one of the other things that we see come up that ties to somewhat of like what you were talking about of being involved in the firm itself, even as a designer, is some of the best firms that we've seen that are not highly published, not really seen, like they're actually empowering their employees through transparency. They're letting them see like the financials on a specific project and be able to actually advocate for things during the project. Anyway, yeah, I think this is kind of just signaling everything we're talking about here is just how things have to change, because the underlying assumptions of the industry have already changed, and you're either reacting to that or being proactive about it.
Yeah, I mean, I say yeah, but I've also been saying that for 20 years. So, I do think we are seeing generational shifts like we haven't seen before. And in terms of the labor force and what, I'd be curious, like what enrollment is like in architecture schools. My intuition would be it's going down. I don't have any data, so you could check me on that. But I think it used to be this like occupation. You'd see kids and say, "Hey, what do you want to be?" "Oh, I want to be an architect when I grow up." And now my kids want to be YouTubers. Like that. So I think that, and it's not that architecture's gotten worse as like an occupation. I just think the amount of possible occupations has grown exponentially. Right? There are so many things that people can do now that artists had one kind of career path, but now with NFTs and Web3 and crypto, it's a very different trajectory for what an artist can be. And with the blockchain and with decentralization, right? 10 years ago, the full-time job would be a community manager, right? And I bet if I looked on LinkedIn now, there's tens of thousands open positions for community manager. So between a combination of increased specialization and expansion of industries and types of work, there is, where maybe architecture was like one of 5,000 occupations. Now it's one of 100,000 occupations. And so I think that it's not kept up or, advanced in the way that other occupations have. And so just the talent that used to go there isn't.
Yeah. But I think it's also, if you were to look at it from maybe either a proactive or optimistic perspective as a firm, I think those are all opportunities. I'm always, NFTs for me is some place where I kind of dabble, but I'm also cautious. But even the idea of like, if the next generation wants to be YouTubers, then bring those YouTubers into your firm to expand awareness of what you're doing in a different way. I mean, there are YouTubers now that like any it's to underscore, like, it's not that people have lost interest in architecture. There's probably more than ever been more interest in architecture. The consumption of architecture in media is like the highest. I mean, I almost feel like even non-design educated people, right? What mostly clients, right? Even their palette and their taste has also been elevated because of Airbnb, because of Pinterest, because of all these other tools that have just elevated sort of this design awareness. And yet, I think there's still the struggling about drawing awareness to firms, because again, they might be operating under not tracking those trends as closely as they should be, and not seeing that opportunity about being able to bring in a new generation of folks who are deeply savvy, who understand how these different new channels for awareness work and all this, and giving them that opportunity to help grow the firm.
Yeah, and I think look, that's on the industry, it's on professional organizations, it's on the firms. More broadly, as I think individual firms and individual partners that understand like modern media will do a great job, right? And they exist. Like I'm sure, I don't know them, but I'm sure there's great designers on TikTok that are showing their process. On TikTok the other day, I saw some like urban planner showing me like how to reshape a curb to slow down traffic, and I was like, all right, this person gets it. That's super cool. I didn't understand that. And I think there will be some. I don't feel like it's happening at the scale and level that the industry or the profession probably needs it to.
Yeah, it's just wild when you see, one could knock channels like Architectural Digest because of whatever, but any given video, Cribs walkthrough is like 1 point something million views, if not more.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if firms would sort of rethink this this idea that they sort of have to wait for work to come to them, it's probably a much better impact on the entire industry.
I mean, it's an interesting example you bring up Cribs, right? Because I think part of Cribs is the environment and the person, right? It's like that I get to see how that person lives in that space. And I think there's something inherent in product that is usually there's a user for the product. There is a customer for the product, and it's ingrained in the way that you iterate and make the product better. I don't think as much as a quality of project-based work, but I do think it's more of a product of architecture, that there's less of a user centricity, right? It's the client is not the end user. and the client's who pays the bills. So you serve the client, you build what the client wants. But there is this like lack of user centricity in creating these artifacts that are going to exist in cities and people are going to interact with them. And I feel like that is in my opinion, a fundamental flaw in the occupation, is this disconnect between the user and who pays you, and an ability to be user centric. And so I think that that's something that I feel like the modern consumer is less tolerant of. And I feel like that's something that architecture also needs to wrestle with.
Yeah, I've heard you mention it before. I think it was on the Practice of Architecture podcast. Even just the idea of like maintenance, and it's like the largest cost center for any building, and yet it's so little thought goes into it from a firm perspective. Often, like they're not, and they also have no financial stake in the maintenance side of a building. When it's possible now with different tools that you might be able to kind of reorganize a service.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
around
wouldn't
that.
you think that the person who designed it would be the best person to run it?
Right.
You know, I mean, theoretically, maybe not. I mean, many would argue no. But you know, if I'm recommending this skylight because it's going to do this thing and it's going to, you know, reduce X amount of energy, you know, why wouldn't I be on the hook for making sure that happened?
Yeah.
And so there's like age old arguments, right? It's like, well, we can't spec it because we don't run it. It's like, but you could. You know, it goes back to the broker thing. I think there's like an interest in creating these things and moving on to the next one. And it's ingrained in the practice and education. Like I said, every semester you start a new project from scratch. There's no build. There's no taking the project you built and making it better. There's no, you know, taking one semester to design a whole bunch of components and then reusing the component the next semester. Everything, it's just ingrained in the occupation or the practice or the industry, the profession, that you always start from scratch. And that's actually the opportunity. The exciting thing is to start from scratch. Every site is different, right? We have to site the building differently. We have to take into account all things. Not really, you know, not always necessarily, you know. And so that this like repetition was not seen as a good thing, and that like bespokeness in and of itself is a good thing. And so I think, yeah, I think those are things that are going to prevent firms from fundamentally rethinking how they staff, how they bring on talent, how that talent works, which ultimately then affects like how they get compensated, which affects how they're able to compensate. And so I think all those things go hand in hand in firms' ability to attract and retain talent.
We're almost at time here, but I guess I wanted to just get maybe a little bit of, you know, like a takeaway for those in attendance today that are looking for a career change, or, you know, we have today is the career fair. So we have people that are actually looking for new opportunities. What's kind of a takeaway that you might want to leave with them about how to take more ownership in their career and maybe be more intentional as well?
Get clear on what you want. You know, I think a lot of people focus their time and energy on what they don't want to do, and so they're running away from something. I'm running away from the firm. I'm running away from the late hours. I'm running away from this partner. And then they go to the next one and they find themselves in the same exact situation. And so spend that time and energy on what you're running towards, and be deliberate about seeking opportunities that fulfill what you're running towards. And the people that I see the most energized and charged up with their career decisions have an intentionality to their career. It's not a goal. It's not like, hey, in 50 years, I'm going to be this. It's not these measurable goals, but it's an intentionality that you can kind of pass every decision through. You know, I've got values, and if this situation is not meeting those values, I'm going to change it. And then those can change as well, right? Like, you know, my values might be different after I have kids, right? Like when I'm younger, I'm willing to invest in growth and opportunities and just learning, and I don't care what I get paid. But after I have a kid, all right, well, now there's a different level of responsibility. And actually now that becomes my number one priority, is making money and saving and putting money away. And that just I wasn't thinking about it before, but having that understanding and that intentionality and revisiting that, and that focus on where you're going rather than what you're running from. And I feel like a lot of the people that I've known that have been in architecture find things to complain about, and there's cynicism, but they're not spending that time and energy to say, okay, great, that's fine, I get it. What's good look like? And they can't really articulate it. They're just like, well, just not this. And it's like, well, that's not really helpful, because you're not setting an intention or clarity for what you're looking for, and you're just going to find yourself in the same spot.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with that that are in attendance. Yeah, I think, and the flip side of that is that you also see that intentionality come through in where you're applying and in your interview process and in everything else, because you know where you want to dedicate more of your time. You know that you want to do more research on a firm, so you show up prepared at the interview with a list of questions, you're digging deep, right? And that all, it's like you're able to manifest more because you just have a very clear direction as to where you want to go.
What comes with that is a confidence, right? Someone, when they know what they want, they're able to ask questions like, is this place going to give me what I want? Versus interviewing from a place of, I always think about interviews as, what are you buying or selling? Right. And a lot of folks who are looking for jobs are in the selling position. And the folks that get like recruited are in this buying position. And the best salespeople figure out a way to, preempt not taking certain clients. But if you can go into an interview with a bit of that like buyer's mindset, it's like, yeah, look, I'm going to do my best to impress you with me, but I'm also going to let you know that there's certain things that I'm interested in. I'm going to interview you while I'm here. And people are scared to do that. But what that actually does is it's a sense of confidence and clarity that the candidate has, which most employers will find attractive and interesting. It's like, okay, this person, they know what they want to do. They've got intentionality, and that's the kind of person I want working here.
And the awesome thing about that is it's kind of like a meta lesson in how you should run a firm too, when it comes to like interviewing clients. Like that same logic, criteria, whatever it is that you're using to make that, to be intentional about what you're going to do next, is something you can take away with you in almost in any kind of like situation that requires you to interview somebody for something that you want. Dave, I mean, this has been an awesome conversation, a long time coming. Really excited to have you here with us at Section Cut. And yeah, I mean, we'll be in touch soon, hopefully soon. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks.